Call this meeting to order. Roll call. Council at Large Boots.
Here.
At Large Spear.
Here.
Council Ward number 1 Leeper.
Here.
Ward number 2 Anderson.
Yes.
And Ward number 3 McNeil.
Here.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing there are none, is there a motion to approve this agenda? Boots with first, and McNeil with second.
Anderson.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
Leeper.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Boots.
Yes.
All right, so on to the communications, and Representative Bobby Kaufman was actually on the schedule. So, Mr. Kaufman, if you wouldn't mind making your way to the podium.
Absolutely. I don't usually come with notes, but I had so many different things I wanted to share today that I want to make sure I didn't get off track, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. I wanted to give my usual legislative update, but in addition to that, it's been an interesting year in the fact that the 4 out of the 5 top issues that I think are going to be coming up for the 2018 session, there are specific to Tipton projects and issues that I hope to use the opportunity to solve with these 4 issues. And so usually I'm here giving generalities, but with each of these, I've got a Tipton-specific issue that I wanted to share with you, just to keep everybody up to speed. So, the 2018 session will begin in the middle of January, so it's right upon us, unfortunately. Sometimes I think I get along better with some of my livestock than I do some people in Des Moines. But the big news was there was no special session. You know, there was a big concern over the potential of there being 100, 125, over $50 million in the lowest amount of money that we would bring in from the state. The final revenue estimating committee came out in October, about a week ago. And the governor has the ability legally to transfer $50 million from the emergency fund to cover any shortfall until we can get back. We were concerned over $50 million, we would have had to go back to session. All 150 of us would have spent several days, if not a week, using your tax dollars to get the budget in line. Thankfully, it was well under her authority of $18 million, and so she was able to transfer those funds, and we'd not have to go back to a special session. They'll have to be paid back in January, but it means that we can wait until we're actually supposed to be back there. On to the 4 biggest issues that I see coming up in 2018, and more of them that oddly in the last few times turned into Tipton-specific issues for me. Tax reform is going to be a significant issue in the 2018 session. That doesn't just mean tax cuts, it means tax reform. There's a growing bipartisan consensus that the program of giving out tax credits and also straight out checks to a lot of businesses has been on autopilot for way too long. The state is spending a significant amount of money writing checks to companies who don't need to be getting checks. And so we're hopeful that that will become something that comes into play. But in this tax reform lies one of the biggest issues that we've seen, and I know you heard from Brad in this, that is EMS funding. That's a tax issue. And so we had a huge meeting last week, and I'll tell you about that in the second part. But when it comes to tax reform, ensuring that EMS is finally able to be properly funded sustainably is going to be something important that I'm going to shoot for. Water quality is a significant issue. Last year, the bill that I proposed did not go through, would have provided a revolving loan fund for small communities such as Tipton to be able to tap into those funds to help pay for water improvements. That bill did not go through, unfortunately, but I'm optimistic that a water quality bill will go through. And that leads me to what I'm going to talk about in the second part, which is my conversations with your wastewater manager. Mr. Brennan and I have had a lot of conversations about the pending project. The next issue, workforce development. Our new governor is now our governor. Kim Reynolds is the governor. Former Governor Brand says over in China. I wouldn't want to be there if I were him. But he's there, and the new governor has put a huge emphasis on workforce development. And while they're not a Tipton-centered business, I know they've got a Tipton phone number, but also that this is an issue in many Tipton businesses, and that is, I went to HWH's opening this Saturday. Not that they're opening, but their major expansion. And they already need 20 more jobs. They have 20 good, quality, high-paying jobs, and they cannot get people. They're working with temp agencies. I connected them up with Muscatine Community College, trying to do some training. And on top of that, this new expansion is 40 more jobs. So just HWH is going to be looking for 60 different jobs. And so the governor has made workforce development and training people to get back to work, and also to people that don't always want 4-year degrees. They want to have a 2-year degree and go right into a high-paying job like HWH. And then finally, mental health is always a significant issue. Something I pushed hard for last year. For those of you that knew about the Certificate of Need Board, that board is the gatekeeper for health care facilities to be brought to the state. It's a 3-person board appointed by the governor, and they say yes or no to a new hospital, to a mental health institution, et cetera, et cetera. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with our sheriff's department about the issue in finding mental health beds. I've received a call from him on occasion when he's had to drive hours away to place a patient, only to possibly even be told no. I had to personally intervene on one issue because he was 3 hours away with a patient. And one of the big things that frustrated me was there was a healthcare mental health facility that tried 3 times to put themselves up in Bettendorf. There have been over 100 beds. And the Certificate of Need Board, there's conspiracy theories as to why. Hospitals not winning the competition. But they told them no. And there was no excuse, because obviously mental health beds are a significant issue, especially in this part of the state. I ran a bill last year to remove the Certificate of Need decision-making process when it comes to mental health institutions. If you want to come here and you want to be a mental health institution and be regulated, you should be able to. That bill failed, but thankfully the efforts brought up enough momentum that the Certificate of Need Board finally approved, and the beginning of construction should begin next year early, so that next year we'll have a significant amount of mental health beds just 45 minutes down the road. So specific to this, to some of these issues, I was contacted by Brian several months ago about Tipton's need to comply with the new regulations put forth by the EPA and the DNR to upgrade your wastewater and your water treatment plant and all the infrastructure. Obviously, taking on $7.3 or whatever it was $1 million in debt to comply is not something that Tipton can feasibly do. That being said, obviously not complying with DNR rules is not something that can be done. And it's really been the defining issue for me in my 5 years so far with small towns, has been dealing with this water upgrade issue. And I've done a little bit of research, and I don't pretend to be an expert, and Brian and all of his folks are far more qualified to talk about the details of the Tipton project than I am. But speaking on a 20,000-foot level, just in our area, I've had contacts from Bennett, from Tipton obviously, Stanwood, Clarence, and Durant, and Wilton, all with this issue where, in my opinion, the idea behind this concept years ago was a noble one. Of course we want all of our systems and all of our towns to be upgraded so everybody has access to high quality water, no question. The problem is, I think the ruling treated small towns in the same way, in the same timeline, in the same financial burden that big towns are. Obviously Chicago, or even Cedar Rapids, can afford things at a much quicker or more significant rate than a Tipton or a Bennett. Unfortunately, the ability to stretch that out and the ability to be negotiated so that it can be compliant but also work towards in a slower manner has not been met with a lot of open arms by both the feds and the state. And so I applaud your water department, all the folks, because they have been on top of this. We've had probably 7 or 8 conversations, and I know the latest, and I don't want to speak for them, but I was told that there's a 120-day pilot program on a company that's significantly cheaper. And I know that the question of whether you guys qualify is pending. On my end, where I come into play, is if indeed you guys deem this to be a good project and you qualify and you could be a part of that 120-day pilot, then I've formally put the request in, working with Brian, that the DNR allow you to do so. Taking on $7.3 million in debt is just not something that's feasible, obviously. This seems to me to be something that could possibly be a bridge. That being said, it's contingent upon the state, in my opinion, to solve this issue. I don't have sole authority over it. The feds still can tell me no. But it has gone on so many of these small towns that when we do this water quality bill, similar to how we do the tax reform bill that I'm going to talk about, we can deal with possible EMS funding. I see this water quality bill, whatever it is. We had competing bills last year. One was more ag focused, one was more city focused, and those two factions, in my opinion, warred too much last year. I'd like to see, I was both, we're rural and we're urban, and I'd like to see a mix of those two bills that provide some sort of funding mechanism, because don't forget, the the tax dollars that are used to fund this tax bill are yours. And so as far as I'm concerned, one of my big goals is going to be to push small towns to qualify for some of these water quality funds to help pay for these projects. Last week, finally then I'll stop talking and take any questions, but I won't take up too much of your time. But obviously for years we've been beating our head against the wall with EMS not being an essential service. I've had multiple conversations with Brad. As far as I'm concerned, he didn't know I was going to say this, he didn't ask me to say this, but he's doing a phenomenal job. Stretching resources as far as he can stretch while still providing quality services. But as you've read in the paper, Sandy Hike has done several articles. The critical juncture point is now, if not already passed. And a lot of the issue has been, we want to raise property taxes. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a debate when it comes to EMS funding that all of us expect when we dial 911 that somebody's going to be there. Somebody's going to answer, someone's going to show up. And so I see tax reform, we're talking about not only cuts but also revenue. We're talking about possibly lowering the amount of checks that are going out to businesses. We're taking away the tax credits from those that do not deserve them. Not saying all tax credits, because the historic tax credit has been wonderful for Hardacre Theater. Not all tax credits are bad, in my opinion. But I see revenue options in a tax bill. And it is going to be my goal when we're doing this bill, to again watch out for the small towns and watch out for emergency management funding. A few things that we talked about at the meeting, I'm not going to go through the 8 different things that we discussed because I don't know which ones are going to end up floating to the top of the pile. But Iowa remains, when it comes to Medicaid reimbursement, lower than our surrounding states. The question was posed, why are we lower? Why can't, when someone gets a call that's on Medicaid, why can't they get properly reimbursed? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm here to report that that's one of the issues I'm going to be investigating. One of the big, exciting ideas that kind of popped up in this meeting was between myself, with Brad. We had several state officials, as well as some other EMS folks from different counties that had innovative ideas, and we just sat and we had a brainstorming session. And one of the exciting things is, one of the biggest problems with costs is having to have staff because the number of volunteers is not only down, but also aging. Well, there's obviously a healthcare situation in this country, and people that are younger, there's a big debate on how they can get healthcare if they don't have a good job, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what it's going to look like, and this is a very generalized statement, but it's one that hasn't ever been brought up before, and that is, why couldn't we look at new incoming EMS volunteers being able to be offered health insurance through the state plans? They say that the healthy young people are those that contribute to the fact that as you get older, the healthcare costs go up. This seems to be able to possibly kill 2 birds with one stone. It's incentivizing young folks to be able to come into the EMS world via the ability to have healthcare, and also it injects the state pool with a bunch of younger people who aren't necessarily going to have to go to the doctor as much. Don't know what that looks like, but that is another issue, providing healthcare to EMS volunteers that I think was one of the biggest possible breakthroughs. And then finally, obviously, the obvious is the state ponying up more money. I mean, that's the obvious way to go. And I don't know again what that looks like. I didn't come to you tonight with a plan, but I sat here before you a year ago and said we would push for it. We had the meeting. We've got kind of a plan to pursue. And as this continues, I will most likely in January write up a big article that is always in the Tipton paper with the narrowed down kind of focus on how we can pursue this. But this is the year, as far as I'm concerned, where we finally solve the sustainable emergency management funding problem. Because there's no excuse not to. When we're possibly redoing the tax code, not only at the state or the federal level, to me there's no excuse that I'm going to be pushing for not only that, but also small towns and water quality, workforce development so businesses can hire folks, and then the obviously continuing that mental health facility was a breakthrough, but it's certainly not the end of it. If you remember last year working with Don Smith, we changed the levy so that Cedar County's dollars wouldn't get taken. That's just a 1-2 year fix. So we're going to have to go back and continue to pursue mental health. But I think those 5 things, water quality, tax reform, workforce development, and continuing to pursue mental health, are things that are not only going to be pursued this year, but I think things that can be pursued working with both parties. None of those things are things that are Republican or Democrat, and I think most people don't care about Republican or Democrat, they just want results. So, that's my update. I apologize for taking so long. I appreciate the time, and I would be happy to take any questions you guys might have for me.
Who would we, who's the one in control of making the change to make EM services essential?
The Ways and Means Chair. So you've got the Tax Writing Committee and the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee are the ones that do the budgets. The Ways and Means Committee is the one that does the tax reform. Any tax, any fee, anything to do with the tax code goes through that committee. The big difference, his name is Guy Vanderlinden. He's from Oskaloosa area, Mahaska County, and he and I have had friendly, open conversations since we've had that meeting. He's making no promises. I'm not going to tell you that he's going to say yes or no, but it has become such a crisis. The problem in the past has been that a lot of the urban counties don't feel the crunch. A lot of the urban counties are doing just fine. And so a lot of the legislators, both Democrats and Republicans, they don't hear the problems that we hear, that you hear that Brad tells you. But enough of the rural legislators, again, both Democrat and Republican, are hearing that this is the crisis point. And so my hope is, A, that he will be supportive, but B, if he's on the fence, that enough of us, I now am on the Ways and Means Committee. That was something I was never on for the first 4 years. It drove me crazy, because I would have a bill passed to a policy committee, only to lose complete control of it as it goes into the Ways and Means Committee. So I'm going to be focusing a lot on small town water and EMS reform as a member of the Ways and Means Committee this year.
Right.
How successful I am, I don't know. I'm going to try, like hell.
But we all need to write letters.
I think anytime you can write letters, but also the biggest thing, this is what I told Brad when we had other folks in the room, people do listen to people outside of their district, but not nearly as much as they listen to people in their district. So if any of you have family across the state, it doesn't matter whether they're Democrat or Republican, if you've got a sister in western Iowa, a nephew in southeast Iowa, ask your family and friends in other districts to personally contact their legislator, because that really means something. When I see someone contacting me from Cedar Rapids, I'll do what I can. But if I see somebody contacting me from Tipton or Stanwood, I'm right on it. And so I would recommend anybody in your network reach out to their own individual legislators as well.
I wanted to just mention what you were talking about with Brian Brennan about the wastewater process. I think we have to realize as a city, this is a big deal, whether it goes one way or another. If we go the way that we're sort of on the course for now, it's a $7+ million project. If this other technology might work for us, it might be something under $1 million. If you take the project the city is working on right now on stormwater infiltration, if you take that debt and then add a debt for this mechanical plant, if we have to go the more expensive route, if you add those two debts together, I had the DNR, or IFA, do a debt schedule. The annual debt would be over $700,000 a year. Both of those debts would come on to make that debt payment in around 2021, 2022, when we're just coming out of the woods on debt we have right now. It would put it all back. Sometimes it's the difference in how they measure the results. A number of years ago, a lot of towns had to do water treatment plants because they changed the way they measured radium in the system. Here, the difference might be, this technology we're looking at, might be measuring the results on a monthly basis versus a yearly. On a yearly basis, this technology we're looking into might be fine. On a monthly basis in some winter months, we don't know yet. That's why we want to look at this pilot study. Sometimes I get the feeling that, I know the idea of regulations, but sometimes you get the feeling that there's a sort of a governmental planned obsolescence. You know, once everybody thinks they've complied with all the rules, we change the rules. And you see that, just like you said, hitting smaller towns to the point of inaffordability. So I really appreciate your taking a role in this, and we're still waiting on some results from the firm that would do the pilot study that would help us with it, to see if our test results would match his system. But if it does, it really should be a community goal to see where we could go with that technology.
Well, I appreciate that, and if you do hear back from that company, I know Brian will get a hold of me, or you can, and you do qualify, I will move heaven and earth to make sure the DNR says yes, because there's no excuse, none, zero, for them not to give you that opportunity to pursue the lower cost opportunity. It really has been the defining issue in small towns for me. I have to go to a Solon City Council meeting tomorrow because of a similar situation. I won't spend time talking about Solon here, but they've got a a community of 14 that all of a sudden, because of new regulations, are asking the city to pipe them out 2 miles water because they can't comply with all these new rules. You got 14 people who are going to have to spend millions of dollars, and you've got a city that doesn't have to be responsible for them. And it's just, so I've never dreamed I would be dealing with water quality issues when it came to small town wastewater. That was never on my radar, but I'm making it a point to bring myself up to speed. He's been fabulous in keeping on top of it, keeping me up to speed. When he first emailed me, it was like he was speaking Japanese. I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. But he brought me up to speed on what it means, and anything I can do to help the initial plan get approved of the pilot, but also get a permanent fix at the state level, it's been one of my top 3 priorities this year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. All right, so that is it for the scheduled. If there are any unscheduled communications, this is the portion for that. So, yes, just state your name and your address.
Mary Swan, 1110 Plum Street in Tipton, Iowa. And I've spoken about this before, and I'm going to speak about it again, because I just don't get it. Brian Wagner was nice enough to send me the list of streets that are truck routes. I thought I knew exactly where it was, and I was going to bring it with me. I didn't know exactly where it was. But the farm traffic on Plum Street is very, very, very severe. So last night I called a dear friend from my days up north, and his name is McNeil, and he's a cousin to Tim. He has a doctorate degree in ag. He has his own ag consulting business. He farms, and he just built and opened a plant to process aronia berries, if you can imagine. So I asked him what the weight was of these vehicles. And this is mostly Deere. I've also seen Case IH equipment. This is an enormous tractor with 2 enormous wagons full. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All the way out north to the gravel road north of Plum Street. 120 to 130,000 pounds loaded. And we have constant semis back and forth, back and forth. He said the semis loaded would run probably 70 to 75,000 pounds each. 11 years ago, we recall that we put in a new Plum Street, part of the new Plum Street, and tore the street out to bedrock. Somebody told me today that they think the cost of that was about $750,000. It went on for over a year, as those of you that were on the council will remember. We had a little gravel path going around Parkview and coming back around to get to our houses. The cost may have been more than that. But to allow this farm equipment to destroy this street, I just think it's an outrage. We've never had anything like this before, ever. I've been in town about 24 years. And I guess when I said to Michael, I was telling him, you know, that you said the DOT had made these streets truck routes, and I still can't understand why there are so many. Oh, is there like 7, I think, that are truck routes?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay, I don't either, but it's, you know, and I still can't figure out why our street is a truck route, but I guess that's not important. And I said, what do you think the simple solution is? And he said, put weight limit signs. Limit the weight. And I said, how can you do that without the DOT's approval? And he said, I don't think the DOT controls truck routes when they're within city limits, but I don't know.
No, I don't think so. If it's not a DOT jurisdiction, but do you know anything about Plum Street? Is it a truck route or farm to market or anything like that?
Well, that was established before I came, and along with some others, and we all know that farm equipment has gotten a lot bigger since those truck routes were established. That's a given. I also know that a lot of those tractors, combines, whatever, they have a bigger footprint, so that's spread out a little bit more, even though it does weigh more. But I think that the city, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, I think the city establishes the weight limits inside the city limits that are not DOT highways. So I think we have that authority. I think there's also some farmer market roads that are very critical to the business here in Tipton. And we build streets to handle some of those roads. Like 7th Street, for example, 5th Street on the west side, those concrete streets are built, designed for that kind of travel. 11th Street, built, designed for that travel. South Street, same thing. I'm not concerned about those. I'm not sure exactly, Mary, what Plum Street, how it was built, designed.
It's not because they changed their mind at the last minute, that was Bolt.
I was a little before my time, so I'm
Instead
not.
of concrete, it's asphalt.
It is asphalt, yeah. I don't know. There are asphalt streets that are built to sustain heavy loads. It all hinges on what kind of a base do we have underneath that asphalt. That's a huge factor. And what kind of drainage do we have under that asphalt? So I know our new standards in town for normal streets are 7 inches of compacted rock along with 7 inches of concrete on top. That's our standard at our new development. So does it need to be looked at? Maybe, yeah. I think as responsible public works guy, yeah, maybe we should review that whole thing because it's been that way for a long time.
It's been what way?
The truck routes themselves.
Oh,
They've been there for a long time. I look back in the maps and to see where the truck routes have been, and they've been established a long time ago based on the businesses that the city also tries to encourage. So that's all I can add to it, I think.
the other part of it is that they're exceeding the speed limit by a lot, and I think Tim will agree with that because he's seen them also. If an older person or a kid runs out in front of one of these vehicles, they won't even find a grease spot. They're going very, very fast. It's really quite egregious. It seems like it's getting worse. And I guess the part I don't understand is that they don't have to use Plum Street. When you go north there, they've got a way out, north, east, and west. It's just easier, and of course it's a nicer surface, and you could just make a straight shot up there.
Are you talking about farm again or something else?
Pardon?
When you say they, are you talking about farm traffic again or
Right,
something
right.
else?
Farm traffic, yeah. It's not like they're landlocked. They can get out 3 ways on the back roads up there. They don't have to use Plum Street. They go right to the highway.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Swan. All right. Anyone else?
I'll try to be as brief as I can. 2 years ago, we had a city election. Some of you might remember that. Quite a few of you are here tonight because of that city election. Some people are not here tonight because of that city election. But I want to bring you back up to date for those who have short memories. And, of course, Brian Wagner was not here 2 years ago, so he does not know what the issues were 2 years ago. So to refresh your memories, 2 years ago, there was a great deal of concern among the residents of Tipton about the condition of the streets and the fact that we were not keeping up with repairing the streets. And also, through the course of discovery through the whole summer, I discovered that we had almost maxed out our debt. We were carrying a heavy debt load, but there was a lot of sewer issues that had not been addressed. And so it appeared that Tipton was starting to get behind the 8 ball on some of those factors. And at that very time, the number one priority of the council that sat at that time, the number one issue on their mind, every meeting that I ever went to, never heard streets discussed, but I heard the airport discussed a lot. They were more concerned about building a new airport than they were taking care of the streets, paying down the debt, taking care of the sewers, and the other issues that Tipton had to take care of. So, That's what happened in the election 2 years ago. Now, 2 years later, still no street repair. And it's understandable based on the amount of debt that we had at that time. In the last 2 years, I've sat in these meetings and on a meeting-by-meeting basis, listened to problems developing in the city electrical department, hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million, spent on engines to bring that electrical power plant up to par, so we could recoup some money from that. Electrical wiring problems here and there throughout the city. Engineering and repair problems with the aquatic center on an ongoing basis. So we're still continuing to find problems developing as we go along. Tonight we're talking about a wastewater treatment problem that we're going to be facing. And that's not going to be cheap even if you get the low bid. That's still a lot of money. Tonight on your schedule, you're going to be talking about setting up a committee to hire an engineer to look at Highway 38 through town. That's going to be expensive. Speaking of engineering, I am kind of amazed at how much we spend on engineering in this town, in this community. It's just like every time we turn around, we're hiring an engineer to study this, do that. We've had McClure in here almost nonstop for years now. And as a matter of fact, based upon the airport committee report that I read, it seems like we're still under contract with McClure. And unless somebody can tell me differently, it looks like we're still considering down the road, considering an airport improvement project, which would involve purchasing land that we can't buy from people that don't want to sell, and spending, at that time, it was $750,000 or more that we don't have. So I think this council, on behalf of the citizens of Tipton, need to be very careful about where you put your priorities and where you're spending your money and your time. Now, one other issue that's going to show up on your agenda tonight, you're going to have a closed session about it, and that's purchasing property. I think you want to be very careful if you're going to purchase some property. You need to be really sure that it's absolutely essential to the operation of the city of Tipton. Because that's money that needs to go in somewhere at a higher priority. Fixing streets, fixing sewers, fixing something else. So that's my little message for tonight. I do still want to one more thing, because I think 2 years ago we had an opportunity to find out exactly where every candidate stood on the issues. We knew what they were for and what they were against. This time around we haven't had that opportunity. We've got a couple of candidates running for one position, and I could not stand here and begin to tell you what they stand for. I think it's a real shame that the city of Tipton has not held a forum giving the citizens of Tipton an opportunity to meet these candidates and ask questions, so when the person we elect for the next 4 years sit on this council and make decisions, we at least know what their priorities are. So, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment?
Definitely.
I wish I could say I appreciate the lecture. I do take offense that since I've been on council, not 1 year has the city council that I've served with not had street repair as their priority. So I think that you misspoke a bit.
I think the results speak for themselves.
Thank you.
All right. All right, then moving on to the consent agenda, which these can be enacted. Oh wait, sorry, there's no one else. Nope. Seeing that no one else is going to be for the unscheduled communications, moving on to the consent agenda. These can be enacted with one motion, which is the approval of the city council minutes from October 9th, approval of the treasurer's investment report from September 17th, approval of the Tipton Development Director's report from October 17th, approval of a liquor license renewal for Dollar General, approval liquor license renewal for Pizza Hut, and approval of airport minutes from October of 2017. Is there anything that needs to be pulled out and discussed? Excuse me. Then is there a motion to approve this?
Second.
Anderson with the first and Spear with the second.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Boots. Yes. Anderson.
Yes.
All right, then now to the resolutions for approval, which there's one, which is the resolution for accepting the park improvement project as complete. Mr. Wagner?
Yes. You have in your meeting packet a letter from our engineer, Jack Pope, where he's recommended that the project is complete and substantially complies with the terms of the improvement contract with Triple B Construction. Later in the agenda, you have a pay application that's connected to the project, but under his recommendation, we've developed a resolution which accepts the project as complete.
Are there any comments on this? Well, I think it looks really good,
I agree.
and I think it's a great collaboration between the school and the city too, to be able to get this done. Is there a motion to approve this? Leeper with the first and Boots with the second.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil, Boots. Yes. Anderson.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
All right, so that has been approved, and now down to discussion item, which is the storm sewer flood simulation. Steve?
I don't have a lot on that, other than they did start today. And are there any questions about what they're trying to accomplish with that process? You know, they're blocking off pieces of the storm sewer and filling them with water, basically flooding them, and then putting dye in and seeing where it comes, if it comes out of the storm sewer into the sanitary sewer. And there's 10 sections here in town that they're testing. They've got a municipal pipe tool in town. They're cleaning the sewer first, and then before they do the actual test, so that there's nothing in there that shouldn't be there.
About how long will it take?
I don't know. I think they got through about 3 sections today, and there's 10 sections. I think they should wrap that up this week, I would imagine, unless they have some issues. It's a great crew. I've talked to them today 2 or 3 different times, and one thing that can happen, and they have found some areas that were really cross-connected, which is what we're trying to find out. But one lady did call up and says, "Why is my basement full of water?" And that's probably because that basement drain was going right into the storm sewer. And those are things we're finding out as well. So we're just looking for a lot of good information to minimize this INI. And this is how it happens. And go along with the others, yeah, we do spend a lot of money on engineers, but it's the only way to do that. And then there are some requirements, I think, on projects that have to be engineered. So you don't want a farm boy doing that. So I wouldn't want to do it anyway. Any questions on any of that?
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Now to motions for approval, which the first one is the claims list. Any claims that need to be pulled out and discussed? All right, seeing as there is none, is there a motion to approve? McNeil with the first,
Second.
and Spear with the second.
McNeil. Boots. Yes. Anderson.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
Leeper.
Yes.
All right, so moving to the next one, which is that pay application of Triple B for $2,676.39 for the park improvement. Are there any comments? Seeing there is none, is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Anderson with the first and Leeper with the second.
Boots.
Yes.
Anderson. Anderson.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Spear.
Yes.
Leeper.
Yes.
McNeil.
And the third one, which is a garbage exemption request at 55 Meridian Street. Is there any discussion on this?
This is where we just take it to the maintenance.
I think so, the $9 a month fee.
Okay.
Yes. McNeil with the first to approve,
Second.
And Spear with the second?
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil, Boots. Yes.
All right, then to number 4, which is the lease agreement for the north side parking lot.
Yeah.
Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, I included a synopsis and then a draft of the lease agreement. It basically parallels the agreement that was set up 50 years ago and then recently expired a few months ago. I noted the amendments that were made in the agreement. We highlighted those. Those changes reflect the 50/50 cost share on surface maintenance of asphalt. It mentions best efforts by both parties to try to relocate vehicles when there's snow or ice removal. It also mentions the sharing of the west and east parts of that north parking lot. And then we also added a section on termination where it just seemed like 50 years was a long time. And so we did put in a 1-year notice of termination that either party could exercise, but I'm hoping that in the spirit of cooperation that if there are any problems, that year would be used to solve those problems rather than go completely to termination. And hopefully if there are problems, we could solve them before we even exercise termination. But those are the changes. I hope in the rest of it, I hope it captured what you had discussed previously. This is going before the supervisors for their meeting tomorrow. If it's acceptable to you, I was asked to let the county know so they could consider voting for it in this form.
Any comments? Is there a motion to approve this lease agreement?
So moved.
Lieber with the first and Spear with the second.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil, Boots. Yes. Anderson,
Yes. All right, and then the 5th one tonight is the consideration to appoint a temporary committee. And what Brian and I had discussed is that this could either be 2 committees or 1. Is that about right?
Right.
Whichever way the council wanted to go. To split it up with 2 totally different committees, or have the 1 committee share the responsibilities of both of these goals.
The thing that connects them, of course, is the street work, but in the one, we're trying to identify street and related infrastructure projects for next year using funds we have on hand and trying to match projects as best we can to those funds on hand. The second one is consideration of an engineering firm, probably by assisting with interviews to select a firm that would represent the city in working with the DOT on the Highway 38 project.
So, does the council feel 2 separate ones, or 1 committee for both duties? And then who will be on? All right. Doesn't matter which
Did
one.
they decide on what
All right. So Mr. McNeil has volunteered for the Street Projects Committee. And Leanne, did you have a preference? Yeah, and also, we just wanted a couple of people, right?
2 on each,
Yeah.
if that works. So is there a second one for?
I'll do both.
Okay.
All right, well, that was easy. She
She did
volunteered for both. All right, thank you. We have to vote on that too, right?
Sure. Yeah, to appoint.
Yes. Is there a motion to appoint both Tim McNeil and Leanne Boots to both of these committees?
So moved.
Spear with the first,
Second.
and Anderson with the second.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Boots. Yes. Anderson,
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
All right. So now we are down to the reports, and I don't have anything this week. Council report?
I just wanted to comment on Sedco. They had a meeting in October. The office has been relocated, so we're meeting at the courthouse now. The budget was developed to incorporate all of the changes, so it was reduced down to where it should be. And then they've also hired an accountant to help with the financials at a very reasonable price, and I think that's going to be a good thing for them. It'll have a little more control.
All right. Committees? City manager?
I don't have anything tonight.
Department heads? Oh, you're already up here. All right, so then now we have 2 closed sessions tonight. And the first one is for the purchase or sale of a parcel. And the second one is pertaining to the city manager's performance. We'll have to come out of that the first closed session, and then go to another one. And then it'll be adjournment.
Yeah.
You haven't done this for a while.
No,
Yes.
and I know how you hate it.
So,
Not so much.
we deal with the first, we go into closed, and Bruce with the second.
McNeil? Booth? Yes. Anderson?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
Can you shut this off?
Yes. All right, then do I have a motion to not pursue the purchase of the lot discussed in closed session?
So moved.
Leader with the first and Boots with the second.
Booth?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes. All right. Then, is there a motion now to move back into closed session pertaining to the city manager's performance?
Second.
McNeil with the first and Boots with the second.
Anderson?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Booth?
Go back in.
All right. Yeah, you gotta change tapes. We
Are you
gotta
gonna say, oh, you'll come back? Or no?
No, he's rolling home.
You don't wanna know?
Take a long time.
No, we're not, no, we're, are we?
I don't know, I wrote a lengthy.
I didn't even thought maybe.
All right.
He should have stayed.
So, do we have a motion?
Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve Brian Wagner's 3 and 6 month performance evaluation today? Yes, as one.
Yes.
McNeil with the first and Lieber with the second.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Booth?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
All right, so that means Brian Wagner's next performance evaluation will be a year from now.
And do we need to say the
Oh, yeah.
6 months raise?
And the 6 month raise will be on his 6 month. Do we need a, well, it's not an anniversary, it's yearly.
6 minutes.
Yeah, 6 months.
Let him hear the tape.
So we have to make a motion for that too. Is there a motion that Brian Wagner's performance raise still happens on his 6th month?
So moved.
Yes.
Spear with the first and Anderson with the second.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Booth? Anderson?
Yes.
All right then, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Lieber with the first and Boots with the second.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil? Booth?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
We are adjourned at 6:42.